Coople is a job app that allows employers with shift work available to connect with job hunters. The Swiss-based on-demand staffing platform has secured a further $32 million in new funding as it plans to launch in the Netherlands and one other market. Well, joining me now is Coople's managing director, who is Yves Schnoevely. Welcome to the programme. Netherlands plus one other market. What's this other market?
Let me say this, there are multiple high potential options for us that we're currently evaluating. Whenever we look into launching a new market, we take a very close look at two different aspects. Firstly, we look at the market potential. So how big is the staffing industry that we will be facing? Secondly, we look into, which I consider very, very important, is to how open is the market towards innovation happening on the labour market.
Are we talking Europe here or maybe outside of Europe?
Currently, we are very much looking into Europe. Europe can be considered as one of the biggest staffing markets that are available worldwide. Obviously, the US leading the pack with roughly 150 billion in annual turnover. Second place is Japan, but then all the other markets are actually in Europe, yes.
There's a growing number of gig apps. I mean, you mentioned the US, obviously, as a big provider. I mean, how do you consider yourself a gig app?
Yes, absolutely, but with one very important differentiating factor. So with Coople, we connect basically people looking for flexible jobs with companies actually require these kind of workers for their shift-based jobs. The only thing that is really different from the classical platform work is that we are actually the employer of all the flexible workers. So we take the social responsibility and make sure that they have an ecosystem that provides them with everything, protect them, etc., whatever they need, in order to actually have, or actually be in a position to make that deliberate decision to have this kind of career.
Where does this idea of you taking responsibility come from? Is that because of regulation here in Switzerland?
I think it's generally speaking, with the rise of flexible work, the question whether are we in a position to properly protect an employee has been becoming much more important. We see that a lot of labor unions rightfully take also a very close look at that issue. And we believe that flexible work and making sure the employee is protected in the right kind of way doesn't necessarily have to be a dilemma. So it's something that we truly care about. And
when you say that you protect the worker, I mean, do they have, coverage of unemployment benefits, paid time off,
Absolutely.
Things like that? And that comes from you?
Absolutely. That's something that we take care of, that we cover. And I think that's a very important aspect when you think about the gig economy.
But I come back to the why. Why do you do that? Because the gig economy and gig apps have been known to be, or have been dubbed exploitative. Yep. Would you agree with that?
Well, I think it's, to some extent, sure, it's a grey zone. I think that's where innovation basically is maybe 2 steps ahead of the regulatory frame in some of the markets. On the other hand, I also believe that we need to push at some point also the boundaries in order to make sure that we can actually evolve in multiple respects. When we look at Coople, from our point of view, we truly care, or we really look at our flexible workforce as our personal, extended workforce. So we really care about our Cooplers. That's how we refer to the flexible workers from our perspective. So for us, it's a top priority to make sure they have everything they need.
So would that therefore mean that it would be quite difficult for you to move into the American market because you have all these extra responsibilities?
Not necessarily. I think we have a very good set of experience in terms of how we are launching new markets, how we approach regulations, etc., how we can make sure that our product reflects basically the regulatory frame. And by that, I think if you do launch a new country with our core business, you have to do it right. That's from our perspective. But on the other hand, when we look at Coople as such, providing a planning tool on how you can actually manage your workforce, there are a lot of options also for us to conquer or launch markets that not necessarily has to be in the very, very core of our business. So there are multiple ways on how we can launch and tap into new opportunities.
Let's just kind of look a little bit more detail at Coople. I mean, how many employers and how many employees do you have?
to do so. So currently we are a home of a little bit north than 400,000 employees or flexible workers. On a monthly basis, we are adding roughly 10,000 new workers, so we're in a very high growth trajectory at that point. When it comes to companies, we are serving currently a little bit more than 20,000 customers. So we really want to make sure that we get the supply and demand in balance, and that we can have a growth on both sides that matches each other.
I mean, what's driving business, though? Is it coming from the employee side or the employer side?
Both. So what's really the driving force of Coople, or why does Coople grow, is the ever-increasing demand for flexibility that we can see in the labor market or in the world of work. Mm-hmm. So both from an employee perspective, flexibility has become much more important as we were moving from a more work-centric environment to a life-centric environment. And on the other hand, we can see that a lot of companies are in need for a more flexible way of how they plan their workforce. So that's the ultimate driver that makes us grow.
And what's this Swiss gig economy environment like?
The Swiss gig economy, I would consider as a fairly open-minded community. So we do have an ever-growing share of people that deliberately take the decision to work flexible, to work on gig-based jobs, etc. On the other hand, I also consider it a very fair approach that we are taking there. So in terms of how we are making sure with also some of the umbrella organizations that we are working very closely together to make sure that we don't see employees deliberately taking that decision being exploited. So that's something I would say is very characteristic for the Swiss gig economy. And
what about the gig economy itself in its impact on jobs? I guess a lot of people say that it was a huge opportunity, but then many might say that it's destroying the traditional job.
From my point of view, I truly believe personally that we will see a very radical shift in the world of work. So if you look at the employees, relationships between employees and employers, they are becoming shorter. We can see that young people, mid-20s, for example, have had much more jobs or gigs than senior people in the labor market. And I think that's also absolutely shows in which direction we're heading. So we are going to see a shift, basically. So very well-known premises are being refined, from my point of view, mainly through a higher level of autonomy and flexibility. So if you ask me, yes, so we're going to see a very radical shift when it comes to that.
And very, very quickly, I just want to ask you, how do you make your money?
From our business model, basically, is very simple when it comes to that. So for us, whenever we are able to make work happen, basically, that's when all the parties basically win. So,
okay. So all the parties,
meaning the employee, the company,
all
and
pay
us.
you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.